Hello dear chess friends, today we are starting second round and today we will talk about maybe an important match in this round, Armenia against Ukraine. Yesterday Armenia lost to Israel 2.5, 1.5 and Ukraine won against Russia 2.5 and 1.5. So today Armenian first board started with white colors. Levon Aronian is playing against Ruslan Panomarev, and Levon started his game with c4. Panomarev answered e6, and Levon played g3. So I think today will be some Catalan, because if Levon wants to play some Queen's Gambit or maybe some Vienna Gambit, so he would choose d4. But he start with g3, so I think they will play some type of Catalan positions. So Ruslan answered d5, and now I think Levon will play bishop g2 or maybe knight f3. So our second board is for today. Okay, Levon answered bishop g2, and now Ruslan is thinking. And our second board in this match is Vasily Ivanchuk is playing with Gabriel Sargsyan, and it's a bit interesting that Vasily is not playing in a first board. Usually, many years he was a leader of Ukrainian team, but this time, as yesterday we talked with team captain of Ukraine, Mr. Sulipa, he said that this time they decide to Vasily to play in the second board to make a good score in the second board. So Vasily start today also with c4. Gabriel answered e6, knight c3, d5, d4, and bishop e7. As usually, Sargsyan is playing Queen's Gambit. So now Vasily is thinking. I think he's thinking to take on cd or some line. As we know, Vasily is playing just everything. He's playing all lines, so I think he's just choosing the line which he wants to play. So now we will go to the third board, where he's playing Movsisyan, and yesterday Ukrainian hero Pavel Elyanov, who could win against Tomaszewski and could bring the 2 points for Ukrainian team. So Movsisyan start with e4, and Elyanov played e5. Pavel is a very solid player and very positional player, as I know that he's playing not only e5, but he's playing also c6, which is one of his opening, which is choosing. And against me twice he played c6. So, but e5 is also one of his openings. So knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Usually Sergei used to play bishop c4, some Italian style of playing, but this time Sergei chose bishop b5, and Pavel played a6, bishop a4, knight f6, castle, bishop e7, and d3. I think the main move is here rook e1, but probably Elyanov is playing some type of marshal, which is starting with b5, bishop b3, and castle. So I think because of this, Sergei start the game with d3, so to not play there some other d3 or anti-marshal, some a4. Here now black can't make a castle because of bishop c6, and knight takes on e5. So black played b5 immediately, then bishop b3 and d6, a3, because if not a move like a3 or maybe a4, Now blacks want to play knight a5 to attack the Spanish bishop, like the people call the bishop white color, white's bishop. So white have to save this bishop with a3. Black made a castle, knight c3. Also is possible with knight d2, but I think with this developing, it's better to play knight c3, which choose Sergey. So bishop g4, black start to pinning the knight on f3 and queen on d1. Sergey answers was bishop e3 because blacks want to play knight d4 and start attack on knight on f3. I think it was interesting to play h3, but okay, here maybe even it's not working because blacks can easily take on f3, play knight d4, then take on b3. They have very comfortable position after d5, even they are better. So I think the idea of h3 could be only on bishop h5 to play g4, but blacks also can take on g4. But this is a bit dangerous position, and because of this Sergey choose bishop e3. So now he is waiting knight d4 just to take with the bishop to not have these problems with this pin. Okay, now we have the moves. Elianov played knight d4. I think bishop d4 white have to play because they are forced to take the knight, otherwise they can't move the knight and they can't protect the knight with other move. So white takes, black takes on d5 and knight d5 because no other place for the knight. I think it's possible, it's not possible knight e2 because blacks can just easily take on f3 and play c5. Then d5 is coming, also some knight h5 with black squares. White have a weak square on f4, and it's not easy to make some progress in the king side. Also the black can play somewhere c4 to close the white bishop. Because of this, Sergey chose knight d5 and Pavel immediately answered c5. It's just protecting the pawn on d4 because now is h3 is coming, and if bishops go back to h5, then it's possible g4. Now it's not I think it's not so dangerous to sacrifice of the knight on g4 because blacks don't have this attacking knight on c6. So this is the position now. After c5, Sergey starts to think, but I think both players are on their books, so I think white must have some interesting idea here. Probably it's possible to take on f6, bishop takes on f6 and bishop d5, but then maybe rook b8, I think some a4 or maybe h3, but on h3 maybe it's possible bishop e6 to change the white color bishop. After what I think the position is about equal. So maybe rook b8 and a4 to try to open the line A for the rook. It's important that white took this important square with the bishop for the fight on a A line. Okay, but just back to the game, and now maybe it's possible also h3 to attack the bishop. I think bishop h5 is not so good because also g4 is possible, but knight e4 I think it's good enough. I mean bishop f3, queen f3, it's just white have just a better position. Bishop is much better than his opponent, and d5 square, white squares are very good for white. Rook e1, some e5 at some moment, and white can have a very good and very strong attack. And also they can play some positionally like a4 with the line A. So I think h3, black would go back with the bishop to e6 and try to equalize to change the active pieces knight on d5 and bishop on d3. So I think if they will change these pieces, it will be not much. So maybe white will have some pressure because of these 4 pawns against these 3. But anyway, the position will be about equal. Also, the knight on f3 is a bit better than bishop on e7 because of this pawn structure. This bishop can't be very active. But anyway, let's see how is going the game in the last board that played Alexander Moiseenko against Hrant Melkumian. So here we have some problem with connection. It's no moves here. Okay, let's back to the first board to Levon Aronian against Ruslan Panamaryov. Okay, we stopped the position when white played bishop g2 and Ruslan answers was knight f6. He is ready to play some Catalan after d4. Levon answered was knight f3, and here it was very interesting that Ruslan chose the line with d4 because he could play normally bishop e7 and go for the main lines to the Catalan like castle, castle. That the position we had yesterday against Boris Gelfand against Levon Aronian. So now d4 and Levon's answer was a3. He wanted immediately to play b4 and bishop b2 to start attack on a pawn d4, which is a bit forward to his army. So now he's alone here, and probably it's possible some c5 here. But I think on c5 it's possible to play b4 like in a Benko gambit with black pieces. Okay, if cb, then I take ab, bishop takes, queen a4 check, knight c6 you have to play, and here knight e5. I think it's just quite good for white, and it's not easy to protect the knight. To protect the knight and the bishop. Also this pin is working and the bishop, so it should be better for white. I think because of this Ruslan chose the move a5. He didn't want to allow Levon to play b4, but also he is not playing c5. And here Levon played e3. He starts to attack immediately on a pawn d4. I think if blacks will take on e3, so he will take f takes e3, and it should be fine for him. I mean, he will play d4, he have a center, and soon whites will make a castle, then d4, knight c3. I think it's very interesting position for white for the opening. So because of this, I think blacks will play c5 just to protect the pawn on a d4, which is very important in the position of black. Okay, we have played c5, and okay, Levon took on d4, Ruslan take on d4. I think we will transpose some Benoni positions, type of positions with one more tempi for white. So now I think Levon will think which line to choose, where this tempi can help him. I mean, after some castle, knight c6, probably d3 will come, and bishop e7, or maybe bishop d6 to not let the white bishop to play on f4, where he's very comfortable. So now we have this position, and at this moment CD now Levon is thinking, and Let's check the another game. Second board. Okay, Levon played d3. I think just want to play bishop f4 immediately without castle, because now white, I think black can't play bishop d6 because of pawn on d4 is hanging. So maybe knight c6 and then bishop f4 is coming, which is very good with the ideas on knight e5. Of course, it's possible knight h5 to attack bishop on f4. Then maybe it's possible some bishop g5, bishop e7. It's possible to take, and some knight d4. It's not working because take, and if queen h5, then check is coming. Here is possible some short castle. Now knight d4 is possible, but okay, knight f6. I like the position for white. It's just knight bd2, rook e1, and some ideas with knight e5 or knight e4. Also b4 will come some moment. Okay, it's just playable position. So d3, as we said, answer was knight c6. Black's just answered knight c6, and now Levon is thinking. So we just go to the second board, Ivanchuk against Sargsyan. We stopped in a third move where Vasily was thinking. He chose the line with bishop f4, bishop f4, knight f6. He played e3, castle, and he played interesting move a3. I think he's preparing to play c5, then b4, like in a all-known Queen's Gambit variations. That idea is main idea is c5, then b4 to take some advantage in the queen side. Of course, I think it's possible was knight f3 or some c, d, d, bishop d3, these lines. But okay, Vasily played a3. As we know, he's a player who have his own ideas, and he is playing an interesting style. And the third board, we have Sergei Movsisyan and against Pavel Elyanov. We had the position after knight d5, c5, and Sergei played knight f4. I think a good move. Just the ideas were just easy. It will not let the black bishop back to the e6, and to not allow this exchange of white square bishops. It's very important to change the bishops, white square bishops, and the knights for black. But knight f4, I think I like the move. Just not letting bishop e6 and preparing h3. So now black have to think how to play. Okay, but Elyanov answers queen c7, which is very logical. He's preparing c4 and start some pushing in queen side, and to close this very important bishop, which is pinning the king. And it's possible in the future to have this rook also on f7 attacking the pawn, which is the maybe the main idea in the white's position. So I think if now h3, black can, okay, maybe they can take on f3, then play c4 and bishop a2, and probably some move with the rook, rook a c8 or rook a d8, maybe preparing. Okay, maybe rook a d8 to prepare d5. Okay, so Sergei played h3, and now Elyanov is thinking how to continue the game. Also, maybe possible is bishop d7, just go back by bishop. But this position, I think it's a bit better for white. possible knight d2. Pavel back to c8 with the bishop. I think he wants to play just bishop b7 to protect the important square d5, which is the k square in this line, in this position. Okay, here is very interesting that now c4 is not a big threat because always will be hanging this pawn on d4. It's possible maybe knight d2 to open this square for the white queen, and also to not letting blacks to play c4. Quite interesting position, but I would prefer whites, maybe because of these bad bishops and these pawns. So okay, let's see how is going the game in a going the game in the fourth board. We are playing Moiseyenko against Melkumian. Here games start with d4, knight f6, c4. Hrant usually, okay, his first game in national team, so we wish him a good luck in his first game from national team. Usually he is playing also g6, the lines of Grunfeld, but I think in this game he chose more solid line with e6, knight f3, d5, and knight c3. So now he's thinking, maybe he's thinking to take on c4. Take on c4 or just continue. Maybe he can transpose c6 to a semi-Slav variation. Also possible is bishop e7. Okay, let's see what he will play. So now I think we can back to the game, to the Levon Aronian against Ponomarev, which is quite interesting position. After opening, we was thinking about some bishop f4, of course, but the next move is the bishop g5, which is also very interesting move. So it's the other idea to, I think, to change the bishop to the knight and start to play. I mean, if some bishop e7 or bishop d6, it's not a big difference. To take on f6, take on f6, castles, and knight bd2. Now white have this square e4 for their pieces, and the bishop on g2 is very strong by this diagonal on h1 to a8. I like these positions with white because all pieces are very good and they can play very interesting games by these squares e4, e5, and if blacks start to play e5, then also d5 square will be open for white pieces. It's possible to play rook b1 to try to play b4, but okay, it's Benoni styles positions. So bishop g5, and Ruslan is still thinking. Very interesting opening, starting with an unusual opening, I mean, in this level, but Levon is just, I think he is just want to play some playable position to get to start the game. Okay, let's back to the second board. Ivanchuk against Sarkisian. Here is just no moves. Gabriel is still thinking. Okay, let's see what can play blacks here. I think if c5, then a3 move is very good. So in some moment he could take on c5, bishop take on c5, and okay, knight f3, or maybe possible to take on d5 at the first. This move is really very good. If even these lines with knight f3, so bishop can play. Okay, this is the position. Maybe we can just talk about other matches, how is going the games there. Hungary against China. I think Lego against Jin is very interesting and very sharp position. Well, maybe still they are in preparation, opening preparation, and Jin is thinking. As we know, Lego is very good, very strong in opening preparation, so maybe he put him under some opening pressure. Yu Yangi was okay. He played very interesting move, very aggressive move h4, which I see just first time in Spanish line, with taking a c6 exchange line. Richard reported some small advantage against Bu Xianji, who is very good defender of. He have very good technique for defending, and Ji Wei played the same position against Chaba, but not with h4, but with some other idea. So we just back to our match, Armenia against Ukraine. So yesterday, okay, after yesterday round, I think to our team we need a win today. And now we just back to the third board. Movsisyan against Elianov. They played some moves. After bishop c8, Sergey played knight d5. Knight takes on d5, bishop take on d5, bishop b7. The whites have to take on b7, otherwise if bishop a2, then just bishop f6 with the idea c4, which is I think it's just good for blacks. Bishop takes on b7, queen takes on b7, and a4. So Sergey just want to take a pressure on line A, and sooner or later he will play some move with the knight, and will try to go by queen somewhere by this diagonal, and maybe he can bring his knight on d5. Of course it will be very nice, but I think black will play at some moment d5, then whites will take on d5. Okay, let's see, like d5. Whites will take the knight d2. Try to bring the knight, very important. Square e4, rook e1, and maybe queen will go somewhere to f3. Okay, white will have some small advantage, but they will have this advantage very long. So in this position after a4, Pavel is thinking to play d5, or maybe he wants to play bishop f6 with the idea c4. Try to play on the position rook a8 to open the line c and start some counterplay. Okay, we have a move in the game. Levon Aronian against Panamarev. Panamarev played bishop e7. Now I think Levon is thinking to take on f6 or just continue the game like knight bd2 or maybe short castle. But now if you are playing knight bd2, you are giving the chance blacks to play knight d7, which is allows to bishop exchange. So this is also the another interesting position. But it's just you have to choose to change the bishops to knight or just exchange the bishops. So now I think Levon will took a time and he will think a bit to understand which type of positions he wants to continue. He wants to change the knight, or he just wants to give the chance blacks to change the bishops. So just back to the board number 4. Hrant is still thinking, or maybe some other problem, just he is still thinking, it's no clock here. Okay, let's back to the game. Ivanchuk Sargsyan. Gabriel played b6, which is very typical in the queen's gambit. So now blacks didn't let white to play c5, which is very important, and it's possible to play some knight f3, but then bishop b7 will come. But I think it's some queen's gambit lines we will transpose at some moments and line. But now I think Vasily is thinking maybe he can take on d5. Okay, if e takes d5, then knight f3. I think white have some maybe some pressure, some bishop d3. Also, it's possible to take a cd. Maybe it's better to take with the knight, and knight takes d5. E takes d5, but maybe also it's very interesting to take on d5 with the queen. I remember some line like this, some sacrifice of the pawn, like in the Nimzovich opening. It is also very interesting for blacks to play bishop a6, some knight f3, bishop f1. It's okay, black can have some compensation or okay, some interesting game. But also ed is very solid. Knight f3, blacks can play c5 with this ideas of queen's gambit, bishop e6, knight e6. Okay, I think just playable position. So Vasily is thinking after b6, and let's back to the game. Levon Aronian against Ponomarev in the first board. Okay, this position Levon chose knight bd2, then took on f6. Okay, but it's very interesting that Ruslan played h6 himself, so he just want to whites to solve the problem with the bishop, so white have to choose now. But okay, I think they don't have a choice, they have to take on f6, otherwise bishop f4, I think it's not working because of knight h5, or okay, maybe it's possible also g5 is very interesting, because if knight d7 with the idea e5, maybe whites can play okay knight e4, but then e5 is coming, so maybe queen e2 to not let e5, but it's very sharp position after g5. So bishop e5, and okay, very sharp position. but okay, Levon took on f6, black's take on f6. Okay, now I think maybe long short castle or rook rook b1 with the idea to push b4 to start some counterattack in the queen side. So this is the position. In this moment Levon is thinking, and in all boards I think they are just thinking. So we will take a small break. We will back soon. Dear friends, we're back from the small break. So let's see how it continues the games. As usual, we start the first board, Levon Aronyan against Ruslan Ponomarev. Levon is playing white pieces, and we stop the game with when black white took on f6, and black takes also on f6. So Levon played the castle, black's also answered with the castle, and Levon played c5. Very interesting move. The idea is to start to push queenside pawns with the idea rook a, b1 and b4. Also queen a4 is possible, and the important square for the white knight c4 is open for the knight, and white start to controls also the squares b6, d6. So just good move. Bishop e7, Ruslan attacked the pawn. Now white can play knight e4 because f5, and white have a problem with the pawn c5. So bishop e7, white may have two options to defend the pawn. There are first played rook c1, Levon, which played with Levon, and the second move is queen c2, just protect and let the rook more free. But Levon choose rook c1. I think he just wants to play at some moment queen a4, and or if not queen a4, maybe queen will play to e2. So his queen is now, I mean, is more free, and maybe some other square for the queen. Of course, white still have to play b4. They need this move b4 to pushing the pawns on a queen side. Okay, this is the position after rook c1, and now we will back to the second board. We're playing Vasily Ivanchuk against Gabriel Sargsyan. We stopped when Gabriel played b6, and he was thinking about some moves like knight f3, bishop b7, or we was thinking that it's possible to take on d5, which we also calls that blacks are fine, not any special problems. But it would be not Ivanchuk if he couldn't play an interesting way. He pushed g4, which is very interesting move, and last years it became very popular in many type of positions of Queen's Gambit to push g and h pawns. Whites want to play g5, and if black's knight will go e4, then take on e4, then bishop g2 to start some attack on a pawn e4. After g5, knight had they don't have the place on h5, and knight e8 and d7 wouldn't be the best places for the knight. And here Gabriel answered c5, which is very logical, as we know if opponent is attacking on some side, queen side or king side, it's right moment to break the center. So the Gabriel choose the c5, he is starting to break the center. As we can see, this is the center, and white have a small problem with the king, where to put this king, because long castle now is it's not possible. I mean, because the queen is still on his place on d1, and queen c2 is not possible because the pawn on g4 is hanging. And if now g5, if Vasily will continue the same way, I think it's two interesting options that have Gabriel. Okay, maybe cd is not possible. Okay, then knight e4 I think should be played. Whites have to take on e4, black takes on e4, and now is hanging a pawn on g5. It's a very messy position, so maybe white can protect the pawn g5, I mean with h4 or bishop g2, or just bishop g2, just attack the pawn on e4, and now it's not possible bishop g5 because bishop e4 and the rook on a8, it's just black just lose the rook. So on h4 I think it's possible to play just bishop b7, and if bishop g2, also just bishop b7, just protect the pawn on e4, and again is hanging the pawn on g5. So white anyway have to solve the problem with the pawn, which is on g5. Okay, Vasily played d takes c5. He don't want to let the blacks to take on d4 with themselves. Now black has some options. Maybe bc is possible. Now bishop g2 and probably bishop b7 must be played. But okay, g5, and if knight e4, I think now whites can take on d8, rook takes d8, and knight e2. This endgame could be better for white because of the pawn on e4, which is a bit have some problems with defending this pawn. Also pawn on c5 is a weak, and after maybe some exchanges pawn on a7 is also, but it's not that bad. That also pawn on g5 is weak, and black can have always counterplay, that they can move the knight to c6, then a5 to attack the pawn c4. Also it's possible to play with the d3 square. Knight shoot after knight c6. He can maybe, if they could have a, they could play to e5. Knight can play to e5 after c6, e5, and try to come to d3, where he could be very dangerous for white. Okay, now d6, and Gabriel is thinking. Also, it's possible to play bishop b7, just to have this d4 and dc idea, because rook on h1 is hanging, I think. But now white can play bishop g2, just to protect this important diagonal a8 to h1. And if bc, then the position transposed to g5, then the transpose to bc, then g5, knight takes, and bishop g2. Because here knight I think can't go e8 or d7 because cd is coming. Or just cd, maybe bishop g5, and probably bishop g3. Position is very sharp, and it's a bit hard to say whites are better or not, but it looks like black should doing fine. Knight d5 and some knight c6, because knight f sorry knight f6 knight f6 check is coming, and bishop on b7 is hanging. So this is the ideas which could be played. But dc, and now Gabriel is thinking, okay, maybe it's also possible to take the c5 pawn with the bishop, but I think g5 will played by white, and if knight e4, just take, and bishop g2 attacking the pawn on e4, bishop b7 must be played, and knight e2. Here I think whites are clearly better. Knight c3 is coming. Also knight g3 can, and pawn on e4 is a hanging, and it's just weak, and it's very hard to defend this pawn. So in my opinion, here can be played after dc. It's very interesting to play bishop b7. Also maybe cd here, but then it's possible knight d5 and some complication starts. Okay, maybe knight d5 is a strong move, after which black should be doing fine. So okay, if bishop b7, as we said, bishop g2, just to protect this, and bc, g5, maybe this can be knight e8. Also maybe here h4 is possible to protect the pawn on g5, and now d5 pawn is hanging. Anyway, it's still a play, still a fight. Maybe queen b6, then attack to the pawn on b2. Okay, I could say that this is a very interesting position. Just the only small problem that Ivanchuk have more time than Gabriel. That okay, it's only move number 8, and Gabriel have only 45 minutes. So let's see the next game, which is Movsisyan against Elyanov. We stop the position when 18 move, whites play a4, then continues rook f8. We was also considering that d5 can be played, but as I said, that in this position after ed, queen's take, and knight d2, it can be in a favor of white. Just they have this important square e4, rook e1 is coming, and it's just interesting position, and maybe some small advantage white still have. a4, so blacks continue rook f8, because I think they understand that sooner or later the line E will be opened, and they need this rook on the line E. Knight d2, Sergei is preparing just on d5, just to maybe answer queen f3, which is queen f3, it's bishop g5, some knight b3, but then d takes e4. Okay, on d5, then maybe he could take on d5, then queen takes d5, and we can transpose at d5, which we was thinking some 2-3 moves earlier. Maybe some a takes b5, or just wait, just play rook e1, then knight e4 is coming soon. So rook f e8, and whites continue knight d2. Elyanov played queen c6. I think just a waiting move to see how whites want to continue the game. Also c4 maybe is possible idea to start some attack on a queen side, but not to move the pawn on d6, to not give the white's knight the important square e4. White's answer queen h5, and now they are not letting blacks to push the pawn to d5, and probably Sergei is thinking to start some counter, some attack on a king which is staying alone. Maybe knight f3 or f4, knight f3, but always he must be careful about counterplay with c4. But maybe it's interesting to play queen d5 to exchange the queens, and if we see this endgame, I think it's just better for white. White have an important square c6, which knight can go easily up from d2, from b3 to a5. Knight can go by this. Okay, I think it's white here in this endgame should have small advantage. So this is the position after queen h5, and Elyanov is still thinking. And let's see the last board. Moiseyenko is playing with white, he's playing Melkumian. Moiseyenko had white pieces. Knight c3, we stopped here. Bishop e7. He's going to Queen's Gambit. Bishop f4, short castle, a3. Okay, again this move in this match, but in some other position, but very similar. Franz choose to take on c4. White's played e3, and now bishop c4 is coming. Franz's decision was to play knight d5. Okay, now it's if bishop g3, just maybe can take on c3, play b5. So white's idea is just easy to take on c4, take on f4, and pawn takes to f4. Now blacks have two bishops. And but it's not that two bishops are a big advantage here because of these pawns, and knight soon will come to e5. Usually these positions are balanced and about equal, but white's play is more easily, in my opinion, because they have more places for their pieces. So knights can play, put on one knight on e5, the second on e4, and they always have the attack to the black's king. But also black can play b6, c5 to block this center, to play bishop f6 at some moment. It's dynamically equal position, I think, but maybe some white's play it's just maybe easily, but nothing special. So Hrant answers bishop f6. White played queen d2. Maybe they want some long castle, but it's too dangerous, I think, because the queen side, white's queen side is a bit weaker than king side. So after long castle, this bishop really will be very strong, and he will annoying the white's king b6, just continue developing. And okay, here Moisenko decide that he have to play short castle. We can see what could happen in if white choose long castle. I think just bishop b7 could be played, and if d5, probably bishop c3 is possible, and if not d5, then I didn't see the idea of long castle. So now bishop f3 is coming, and if some move like queen e3, it's possible just continue the developing the pieces, knight c6 or knight d7, then somehow rook e8 or c5 will come soon. No, but it's just playable position for both sides. So bishop b7 have played. Now blacks want to take on f3. Moisenko, I think, have to play knight e5. Also knight is on e5 is staying very good. Rand played knight c6. I think he, okay, white never will take on c6, but I think the main idea of knight c6 is knight e7, just to be protected from the moves like e5 and somewhere d5. Also knight is on e7 is really very good, and he's defending the king. There's ideas which are starting with f5, d5. Also can be some sacrificing on f7, then bishop is taking to e6. Okay, knight c6 and attacking to the pawn d4. White's answer was, I think, was logical. Rook fd1. Okay, maybe it was also interesting to play rook ad1 and the other rook put to e1. That, but okay, this is also possible. So Moisenko choose the line with rook fd1. Rand play knight e7. As we mentioned, that very important knight is staying here really very good. He's not letting d5, f5, and Moisenko played rook ac1. So now I think he wants to play at some moment some b4, then maybe queen e2 and knight e4. Then okay, if after b4 he could play b5, so it will be some pressure on black's position. It's not easy with the black to play a move because it's really very passive position, but very solid, so they don't have weaknesses. But I think it's possible to play queen e2, then bishop a6, try to change the white square bishops. Maybe some knight d5 is possible, but okay, maybe whites can just easily take, and if ed, just bishop d3 or just bishop b5 to try go to the c6. So knight d5 maybe it's not the best move. It's also possible some a6, maybe some c6, just to have more control on the light squares. It's also possible to somehow to change this knight, because it's really annoying black's position. Also in a position style, I mean, to the square c6. To c6 also always will have this knight f7 move, sacrificing the piece, I mean then bishop e6. So Rand is thinking, and he wants to try to somehow to solve the problem of this knight. If he could solve the problem of this knight, so he will solve the problem of all the position. Let's back to the first board, where we are playing Aronian against Ponomarev. So we stopped when Levon played rook c1, and with the idea queen a4 and queen e2. Here Ruslan answered a4, which is very logical. He is stopping these pawns. He is not letting b4. I mean, here if b4, he just take on b3, and okay, he had no problem. And also it's very important that he is taking important square a4 from white queen, which could be stay on a4 really very good, and starting to push the pawn b and attacking the pawn on d4. So the a4, in my opinion, was a good move. Levon's answer was just rook c4. He's attacking the pawn. He wants to take the pawn to a4. Also, he's taking the pressure on pawn d4, so blacks can't move the knight or queen. So, and now Ruslan plays bishop d7. Okay, let's see. Okay, knight d4, I think it's not possible, because black can maybe easily take and take on c5. Okay, white didn't achieve anything. And okay, but Levon took the other pawn on a4. He made this exchange of the pawns on a4 against pawn c5. So let's see how this exchange is for the sides. If bishop c5 immediately, or maybe they can take on a4, queen take to a4, then bishop c5. Probably it's a small advantage for white, because they have very interesting pressure on queen side. They could play maybe some queen b3, because b4 is not possible because of knight b4, and just no move by queen. If something like some move like knight b3, just to attack the bishop, it's possible bishop b6, or I think also possible is queen b6, just to exchange the. Okay, it should be okay for black. And if rook c1, I think the K of moment of the queen b6 is knight e5, just attacking the queen. And now white should play queen a5 to not lose the queen, but I think knight f3 or maybe knight d3 is just favor for black. So just we can see that also rook a4 was, I think, was okay for black. Maybe white can play queen b3 immediately, and here, so now it's hanging the pawn on b7. Okay, b6 is it's not so good, because queen c2, then b4 is coming, and if not b6, let's see, like move like, okay, queen b8 or queen c7. It's not a big difference, I think, between these moves. Oh, I can just play knight e4, then rook c1 is coming. They could have some pressure. Sorry. They could have some pressure on the queen side, and if bishop e7, just rook c1. I think this is just a small advantage for a white. They can play knight d2, knight c4, or just play rook c4 to attack the pawn d4, which is a bit weak, and blacks always have a problem with defending this pawn. So, but let's see what happened in the game. Ruslan take on c5 immediately. Levon continues to taking on a8. Ruslan take on a8 with the queen. Levon played b4. I think if blacks let to white to play b4, this move should be played. Of course, it have its minuses. Okay, the pawn on a3 is hanging after bishop's back to e7. The pawn is hanging. Also, the square c3 is now a weakness for the white, but this move can bring immediately some achievements for white. And now we can see that it's b5 can be played, and if knight a7, then a4 is coming, and it's then knight e5, knight c4. It's very good. Then b5. I think black should play knight a5. It's possible just to play a4. Now knight e5 is coming, and the pawn on d4 is hanging. So maybe it's knight d4, then e5, and black solve the problems. But I think after b5, if now Levon will play b5, knight a5, and a4, should be better for white, as a knight on a5 is not in the best place. Knight e5 is coming. If bishop f6, just knight e4 is coming, and some problems with defending the pawn on d4. Maybe queen a7 just to protect the pawn, but then knight e5. I think this is just good position for white. Even I think you just take on d7. It's a small advantage, but it's such advantage that will be, I mean, some 100 move. Still, white will have an advantage. Queen c2, take under control the line c. With the idea rook c1. Also, it's possible to not take on to not hurry with this exchange, to play some queen h5 or maybe queen f3, bishop e8, and play rook c1 to take the line c, which is really very important. And now rook c7 is coming. I think it's just better for white. So Levon is still thinking, and I hope that he will play b5. Then maybe there is some moves which we couldn't see. Why he's still not playing b5? Because I think moves like knight d8 and b8, okay, they are just bad because of a4, and knight a7 is, I think after a4 it's just bad for blacks. The only move which I see on b5 is knight a5 and here a4, just to protect the pawn, important pawn on b5, and trying to continue this knight's attack. And black still have a big problem with the pawn on d4. They should solve the problem with this pawn. Okay, this is the position, and is the current position, and Levon is still thinking to play b5 or not. Okay, let's go to the game board number 2. Gabriel Sargsyan against Ivanchuk against Gabriel Sargsyan. This was the position after dc, and Okay, bishop b7, the move which we say that must be played, would be a better choice for black. Gabriel played bishop b7. Now Vasily is thinking, we consider that white can have two moves, bishop g2 and cd, sorry, and cd, which we see that knight d5 can bring the, can allow blacks with that solving the problems because of this very strong bishop. So now this is the position, and Ivanchuk is thinking how to continue the game. And now we go to the board number 3. Sergei Movsisyan against Pavel Elyanov. This was the position, and here, okay, Elyanov answer was c4. Here we mentioned that it's possible to exchange the queens with queen d5, which can give some small advantage in the end game. We can see it by moves, c4, take. Okay, probably not cd, probably some rook ac8, but I didn't like rook ac8 because of this ab, and some move by rook from the a line somewhere to maybe a5, but rook c5 is not possible. But rook a5, c takes d3, c takes d3, then rook c2. Probably it's a very concrete move, and because of this he could play c4, because it's very important that queen d5 is working or not, because if queen d5 is not working, then maybe black's doing fine. They can see them. I can't see the real problem. Now black starts with ideas with cd. It's maybe possible also c3 to have some counterplay, and if knight f3 to try to attack to the pawn on d4, then bishop f6 is just coming, just defending the pawn on d4. Now Sergei is thinking it's very important moment to exchange the queens, to over exchanging the queens, or just to continue somehow the game. Also maybe here rook ac8 is possible, just to protect the queen, but I think sooner or later black should take on d5. Here maybe a takes b5, a takes b5, but okay, anyway black will take, because queen d4, just bishop f6 is coming, and the pawn on b2 is hanging. Okay, let's see the next games, and we will continue when Movsisyan will take a decision and he will play some queen d5 or some other move. Let's back to the game. Number 4, Moiseyenko against Melkumian, and here was played some moves. Okay, g6 was played. Rand is making decision to play g6 to open the place for the bishop, because maybe some knight g4 was a threat at some moment, or maybe just he wants to be sure that f5 will never be played. So g6 is a logical and normal move. So queen e2, now bishop a6. I think it's just coming bishop a6. Queen is on a2 is staying really very good. He's helping to play knight. He's helping to play knight e4, and maybe then later on knight will go to g5 to start annoying black's king, and pawn on f7. Queen a2. So Hrant played a6. He's not letting to play bishop a6, and he need this move to be sure that white squares are not white squares are defended, and it's not a, and he don't have problems with this positionally. Because if we take out this white square bishops, blacks will have the problem with the square c6, a6, and because of this I think a6 was a correct move. But now white's played knight e4, now is playing with another side. So now if bishop g7, I think knight g5 is really very unpleasant. Also maybe possible some sacrifice like knight e7, and okay, if knight g5 now bishop d5 is possible, but maybe knight e6, and if the move like the queen d7, then knight c7, queen c7, bishop d5, and it's okay. Maybe queen c1 is not possible because bishop f7 check. But if knight d5, then I will just take rook c7 is not possible because of queen e6, and knight c7. I think it's just better for white because queen and free pawns against rook, knight, and bishop. It's clearly better for white. King is on g8 is not the best one. He is just the weak. Okay, this is also possible. I think just white cannot hurry with knight f7. Maybe we can see some more details here. Knight g5. So possible knight d5, but then queen e6 can be played and starting other problems. Here blacks have to find some. Okay, but let's say that this is just an option for white. It's just maybe better for white, but they can also play knight g5 immediately, and this I dislike more. Now is just the old position is hanging. Probably okay, bishop d5 can be played because even I can, or bishop a6 just with the idea to play f6, which is very interesting. So now maybe we could just take on d5. Maybe a knight should take on d5 because queen d5, c7 is coming. Knight d5, then knight ef7, rook takes, and queen takes e6. Just good for white. Maybe some queen d7. Probably it's not so bad for blacks. G3, but okay, it's two pieces and very solid position. King could stay on d6 and it's not so bad. But here also I'm thinking that here also it's possible knight f4 just to attack the queen. So maybe bishop d5 is the defending move which can be played. Knight d5. Also maybe it's possible some g3 if not, if it's knight ef7 is not working because now not black can play f6 because of knight e6. And okay, I think here white are just white are better, and okay, it's very passive position for blacks because always these treats this tricky position with knight f7 and maybe some other knight e6. Also rook c6 can be played at some moment. So it's just, I think, advantage for white. Okay, let's back to the other games, and knight e4. Herand is still thinking. We will just back to the first board where we was waiting the move b5. We just want to see that Levon played this b5. Okay, it's nice 11 played b5, which we was waiting. Knight a5 continued the game because no other option. a4, as we thought a4 must be played, and queen a7 was the move we was also thinking. Here we thought that knight e5 is a correct move, just to start an annoying black's bishop on d7 and some pressure on pawn f7. Probably some queen f3 will come soon, and rook will go to the line c. So I think here white have an advantage and black must be very careful. Okay, let's go to the board number 2, where is Ivanchuk is playing with Sargsyan. We had this very interesting position. As we mentioned, Ivanchuk played bishop g2, and very interesting move played by Gabriel is sacrificing the pawn with knight bd7, which is very interesting. And so I just will remember you what we was thinking, that we was thinking bc g5, and probably Gabriel didn't like the position after h4, which is a bit passive. He chose the line with knight bd7. He's sacrificing the pawn, but he have more better developing. As we can see, white have a problem still with developing. His king is on e1 in the center, and it's not easy to understand where this king must go, because long castle, I think it's now impossible after this play on queen side. And if knight e2, it's not possible because the pawn on g4 is hanging also with for knight f3. If knight f3 is also knight g4 is possible, the pawn is hanging. Now I think Ivanchuk will take a time and he will think, okay, we can see that Gabriel had before had some time problem, but now we have 42 minutes against Ivanchuk's 45. So now I think if cb, it's possible knight b6 to attacking the pawn on c4, and if cd, knight takes d5, knight takes d5, and knight takes d5. I think it's just good position for black. Knight f4 is coming. Some queen a5 check is possible. It's full compensation for the pawn. I mean, I just like the position. Just black positions is really looks very good. So because of this, after knight bd7, Ivanchuk is still thinking. And let's see the game of the third board, where Movsisyan is playing against Elianov, and we have this position after c4. We was thinking about queen d5 to exchange the queens, but I think that Sergei didn't like this move because of taking, and rook c8, very important move to not exchange the pawns on d3. And if take on b5, so blacks have very good counterplay on a line c. Is now blacks are treating cd, and rook is coming to c2. This is the position. This could be, but okay. Sergei chose the other move. He played rook fd1. He's protecting the knight, and at some moment I think he will protect the pawn d3. Here, okay, if cd, just take cd, and knight b3 is coming next move. I think it's this taking is just in a favor for white. Maybe queen c2 here now, but a takes b5, it's possible. A takes b5, and okay, it's not easy to see because rook a8, and white can't move the queen because of rook on d1. So let's see what was the problem of not taking on d3 and playing queen c2. Maybe some knight f3, which is possible, and if now b takes a4, then knight takes d4, queen takes b2, rook takes a4, maybe some small advantage for white, maybe not, because of bishop f6, and blacks are, I think, doing fine with the pawn, the basic pawn on a6. So maybe knight f3 was the move, but then I think I didn't see a big problem. ba, just rook d2. Okay, rook d2. It's a very important move, just to protect the pawn on b2. Okay, here I think white is clearly better, and now we understand why Elianov didn't take on d3 and play queen c2 because of this knight f3. And if just easily take on b2, I think rook b1 is coming. Some more with the queen takes, and it's just better position. With these weaknesses, white is clearly better. I think because of this, Elianov chose the other move, and on rook fd1 he plays c3. He is trying to activate his pawn. Whites have to take on c3, black takes on c3. If queen c3, I think just rook a2 is coming, just protecting the pawn, and only white can be better here. So because of this, he just took with the pawn on c3. Now I think it's very interesting, and position became sharper, and now it's possible knight b3 or maybe knight f3. Also white can take on b5, but this move will be very interesting because white can take on b5, black can take on b5, and play knight b3. I think it's just better end game for white. They have this moving center, I mean with ce3 and king comes to e3, then d4, and these pawns are weak, and later or soon white could take these pawns, and here I think AB, black should take with the pawn to save the queen, to not let to white to exchange the queen. So here knight b3, and okay, I think even here whites have some small advantage, but with the queens, of course, black's chances are more than without queens. So g6 could be played, and now this end game, it's, I think it can be okay for black because of bishop f6. Now rook is coming to e2. Also possible on g6, white will play, I think, some queen f3 to not letting also to play d5 to activate. But here I think it's just better for white. Rook a4 is possible to double rook on a file, but this should be better for white after some d4 at some moment, some rook a b1, then d4, and start to push these pawns, some central pawns. So let's see. Okay, Sergei took on b5, as we say, and now Pavel is taking his thing. But also, I didn't see, but now I see that blacks have this very interesting move, queen c5. But probably it's not working because white have to take on c5 because no other move. Blacks take on c5, and now if knight b3, just a takes b5, and here blacks are doing fine because now pawn is not on d6, it's just on c5, and maybe c4, rook a4 are coming. Black should be doing fine. I think here the most important move is knight b1, just the attacking pawn on c3. Black should take on b5, and now knight c3 is not working because take, and bishop f6. Rook a3 is not working because b4 is coming. So it's okay, maybe white are not losing with e6, e5, bishop takes e5, rook e1, and just the pin is helping whites. And bishop h2, they have important king f1, so maybe also here white have some small advantage. But here, of course, at least white can take on a8, take on a8, take knight c3, and it's just pawn up, clearly better for white. So I think after a takes b5, white should have some small advantage. Then, okay, let's see what played Aronian in the position. Okay, as we mentioned, Levon played the move knight e5, and now Ruslan is thinking how to solve the problem with the bishop on d7, because maybe b6 is all, but it's just bad. I think it's just bad to give this important c6 square to white. Also, exchange of knight to bishop is possible, but I think they can continue to giving the pressure. Some queen f3, rook c1 is coming next move. I think it's just better position for white. So friends, we will take a small break and we will be back soon. Dear friends, we come back and we have first result in our match. So let's see the game. Gabriel Sarkisian was playing with black against Vasily Ivanchuk, and the position was after ninth move of black, knight bd7, which I considered was very strong move. Whites continue with c takes d5, b takes c5, and now whites can't move the pawn to d takes e6 or d6 because the bishop on g2 is just hanging, and Ivanchuk played on b takes c5, he played knight ge2. Gabriel continues knight b6, he just wants to take the pawn. White plays little short castle, now he wants to take on e6. Of course, the answer was knight fd5 and queen c2. Whites offer a draw. I think the position is equal. Black didn't have any problem. They have the small weakness on c5, the pawn c5, but also whites have a problem with the pawn on g4. So this is balanced the position, and I think it's just equal. So because of this, the players agree to draw, so which is logical. So let's have a look what happened in the game of Levon Aronian against Ruslan Ponomarev. Aronian played knight e5, his 21st move, knight e5. He is attacking the bishop on d7, and we said that black can play or rook d8 or b6, but in every continuation there is some advantage for white. Knight on a5 is really a bad one, and white have a strong bishop on g2 and more active pieces. The pawn on d4 is weakness, it's weak, and is not letting to black to consider these pieces. So let's see what happened in the game. Ponomarev played b6. Here we thought that it's possible queen f3. After what white have some advantage, and but okay, I think it's not the not the only move which can give white's advantage. I won't choose the move knight b3. He wants immediately attack the pawn on d4, and now if blacks will okay, if we change the knights, I think white still have advantage. They won't play rook c1 on a line c. Also possible treaties. Okay, if black will play rook c8, it's possible bishop c6, which is, I think, extremely strong. And if white could exchange the white squares bishops, they will have a really very good advantage. Bishop takes, maybe knight takes on c6. This is huge advantage for white. So knight b3, queen b3. I think black must play some other move like bishop c5, just to close this is line c, and just try to protect the pawns b6, d4 one more time. So if bishop c6, now black have bishop c8, and I didn't see some big problem for black. Okay, white still have advantage, but this is playable, and it's just a small advantage for the white. So let's back here, and I think this bishop c5, or it's possible even bishop d6, just attacking the knight. I think even here knight c6, bishop takes c6, I think bc can be played, and here is white have advantage because of this strong pawn, and weaknesses in the queen side. Black's weaknesses in the queen side, the pawns b6, d4, but okay, this is opposite colors bishops, and as we know that it's always very drawish when our opposite color bishops, so I think it's not the position which wants Levon to play. I think he could play knight c4 to attack the bishop, and if bishop c5, he just could play rook a1 with the idea a5. Here I think white have an advantage, and it's not easy for black to play against this idea a5. Then they're starting to push the pawn b5 to b6, b7. So I think it's just better for white. It's really advantage. So knight b3, we have this position, and Ponomarev have played bishop b4. He just sacrificed the pawn on d4, but maybe he could play in some other way to not sacrifice the pawn. Anyway, this is a pawn, so maybe he could play, maybe he have to take on b3 and just continue the game. Okay, it's bad, but probably he have to not give the pawn. Okay, bishop b4. Of course, Levon took the pawn on d4. He's just now pawn up with good winning chances. So, but now Ruslan activate his queen. Also, he attacked the knight on e5. And here, Levon take the decision to exchange the knight to bishop and to play knight c6. So we get this position. Of course, with the pawn he have to take, because bishop c6 is just after queen d4. Okay, whites are a pawn up, but I didn't see any real chance to win this game, win this position. I mean, after taking with the bishop. So let's see what happened in the game. Whites take with the pawn, queen d4. If you remember, in some variations, without we was watching this position, I will show you it again one more time. So This was the position when we was thinking that white have small advantage, but okay. Let's see. I mean, this position when we consider that this is also white have small advantage here because of this pawn, but now the position is a bit different. Now blacks are pawn down, but they have now active pieces. The queen is active and the bishop is more free. I mean, he could stay on c5, and now he's not that bad that with pawn on d4, with the black pawn on d4. This is opposite colors bishop, and okay, black are pawn down, but I think they have some chances to hold the game. But anyway, Levon played queen c2. Now he want to push c7, and now if he will push c7, pawn to c7, blacks try to play bishop c5, then will come bishop b7, and the pawn will go to the rank 8 and will be queen. So now Levon's treat is just easy to play c7. Oh, I think now black have to somehow stop this pawn. If bishop c5, I think rook c1 is strong with the idea to play a5, and it's impossible to take on a5 because of bishop on c5. So queen c2, and now blacks are thinking. Levon have 35 minutes and Ruslan Panamariof have 28 minutes. So here in this match, after one draw that Sarkisian could make with black against Ivanchuk, whites have Levon Aronian have good winning chances. He's pawn up, and he have really good chances with this very strong c6 pawn to get a point. Panamariof had played bishop d6. Now if c7, he would play rook c8, and the pawn is losing. Now I think it will start some typical positional play, like bishop f3, then king g2 is coming. I mean, just activate the piece, then rook b1, or maybe queen b3, then rook c1, rook c4, with some ideas, rook. And I think it's very good chances for winning. So this is the position, and I think we can see the next game. We're in a third board, Movsisyan playing against Elianov, board number 3. Here we stopped when Movsisyan take on b5. We said that the end game after queen b5 is bad for black, as the pawns are weak and it's just better position for white. So of course Elianov took on b5 with the pawn. Sergei played knight b3, as we thought knight should stay on b3 to take a protected on rook on a1, and okay, it's just we thought it's white have some small advantage. We was thinking that g6 can be played, and we was thinking that g6, queen f3, and rook a4 could be played. But Elianov played rook a4 immediately. He's stopping white knight to b3 to not letting to play knight d4, preparing his second rook to go to double on a line A. And Movsisyan played king f1, so he is preparing maybe for some endgame, and he needs his king near to the center, to the central squares. Also, as we mentioned, that somehow after queen d5 at some positions, black will have some bishop f6 with the idea rook e2. Now I think king f1 is a move that's not letting these rooks coming to e2, which is very prophylactic move. So now Elyanov played g6, and now white have to think to play queen d5, go to the endgame, or just back to f3 with the queen. But okay, here I think queen f3, rook ea8, and maybe white have some small advantage, but blacks are too active in line A. They have some counterplay, they have their own play on the pawn c2, which is a bit problematic for white, and maybe white should play g3, then king g2, but still blacks want, I think rook a2 is coming next move, just to attack the pawn on c2. This is the current position in this game. After g6, Movsisyan is thinking. He have 23 minutes against 35 minutes of Elyanov. So let's go to the last game in this match, where fourth board Alexander Moiseyenko is playing Hrant Melkumian. Moiseyenko had white pieces, and we leave the position when it was played 16 move knight e4. He was considering that bishop g7, and we thought that knight f7 is quite dangerous, also knight g5 is quite dangerous, so Hrant make decision to exchange the strong bishop, but to not let white to start an attack on f7, on e6. Of course, after this exchange, white have advantage, maybe not that much, but very stable advantage. So black have to suffer, I think, to holding this position, because the square c6 and b7, I mean, these white squares are quite weak, and I think black have to play c6 at some moment, because otherwise if white will play b4, then they will put some knight, or then later on they will change the knights, then rook will come to c6. It's just a bad position for black. So the idea of Hrant was to play c6. Just now it's interesting if white will take on c6, black take on c6, queen takes on c6. I think rook c8 is the move which planned Hrant to play, and if some queen e4, he would play b5, then bishops go back to con c1 and queen d4, which is equalizing the game immediately. So I think knight c6 is not possible, but maybe it was interesting to play some bishop e2. Now the pawn is hanging, knight c6, white just want to take on c6, but probably Moiseyenko didn't like this, because again in this game also we have opposite colors bishops, and sometimes you can get a pawn up position, but black can have enough compensation and could manage to make a draw. So I think this is the main problem why he didn't play bishop e2. I think he was afraid of something like type of this position. Knight takes on c6, rook, probably rook takes on c6, rook d7, bishop a6, rook takes, queen takes, and bishop takes on d4. So after b4, maybe probably b3 is not possible because of rook a8, and blacks are doing fine because the end game is clearly drawish. After bishop b2, we stopped it. Okay. I mean b4, but with the idea on rook a8 to play b5. And okay, whites are of course better, they are pawn up, but still it's not so clear how to win this position, because black can play rook b8, I mean some king f1. They need to bring the king to e2. It's probably king f8 is a possible, just to bring the king on e7, then start to playing on exchanging the rooks. Also it's interesting bishop c5, but I'm a bit afraid of taking c5 and playing b6, and this can be dangerous for black. If rook d6, b7, rook b6, okay, maybe it's not that dangerous, but okay, even if this is working, so bishop c5, then king e2, then maybe blacks can play rook d4, and it should be ending in a draw. If because of g3, then rook a4. So maybe now they can take on c5, pawn take on c5, b6, and if, but maybe now black have to defense in other way. I mean king f8 and rook d8, but still it's very unclear position. Maybe white didn't need these moves to be played. So c6, and Moisenko choose the move which is in his style, just some positional pressure on the black's position. He just played g3, preparing the move, the march of the pawn to h5, and open the window for the king to be not have a problem in future on the rank 1, on the first rank. So g3 has played, around play queen d6, he's just protecting now the pawn on c6, and preparing some rook move, maybe rook fd8, or okay, or something. Here white plays h4, as we mentioned, he is starting to pushing in a king side, rook fd8, and okay, h5 I think was really very dangerous, because at some moment it will be some shot on f7 or g6, maybe some bishop e2, bishop, or maybe at some moment maybe g4 will come. But h5 anyway, it was really very concrete move, with the idea just to put the king on g7 and just to not let whites to push this pawn. But anyway, Hrant plays rook fd8, he just wants to activate his rook. Of course, white plays h5, starting annoying the king side of black's king side. Hrant just back with the bishop to g7. Now he's just still have very passive, but I think very solid position. It's not easy to break the position with the white. I think white have to start some attack on line h, but it's not easy, because if you will start to play king g2 with the idea rook h1, so pawn on d4 is hanging, and it's not easy to play to take some concrete play to start annoying immediately black's position. Maybe you should play bishop e2 to put the bishop on f3, or maybe later on put the bishop on e4 to start some attacking motifs on g6 or on f7. But also bishop on c4 is quite good. He's always ready to be some tricky moves, like, or some sacrificing on f7. So we just say that in this position white have small advantage, but very stable advantage. So we just go back to the first board where Aronian is playing against Panamaryov. We have stopped when Black's plays bishop d6. As we mentioned, rook c1 can be possible. Now c7 is coming. Black's play bishop c7. Black's trying to play passive but solid. They want just, I think, rook d8 and later on to play g6, h5 to put the king on g7 and just the wait and to see how whites want to break the black's position. So it's some small advantage. I mean, not small, it's just advantage for white. They have pawn up and with good winning chances. And the third board, let's see, Movsisyan is playing against Elianov. We have this position after g6, and if we was thinking about two possible moves, one of them was queen f3, but we say that after rook e8 blacks should be okay because they have good counterplay on line A. It should be fine for blacks. And the next move, which we was thinking that white can offer a queen exchange, then get some endgame, and because of this we was thinking this position, king f1 g6, and because of this we was thinking that king f1 they need from prophylactic, because now queen d5, blacks have to take, whites takes, and bishop f6. As you remember, we was thinking that now the square e2 is protected by the king, so it's now whites are okay. They will try to play to attack the pawns on b5 and to c3. So Movsisyan played d4. Now he's preparing at some moment to bring his king on d3, and if he managed to bring his king on d3, he will have a good advantage and with some winning chances. So I think black can't move the rook from e8 because king will go to d3. But maybe they have rook e8, because if now king e2, he could take on a1 and knight a1, or if rook takes and hanging the pawn on d4, and if here whites take with the knight on e1, it's possible to take on d4, and so on rook e8 it's not easy to play king, it's impossible to play king e2, and now rook a2 is coming. If move like rook b1 with the idea to bring the king on d3, rook a2 is knowing rook a2, knowing to pawn c2, and if rook c1, just bishop g5. So I think rook e8 is an interesting move with the idea just now blacks want to take on a1 and white have to do something. Of course it's impossible to take on a4 because rook pawn takes on a4 and it's really very dangerous for whites. So this is the position after d4, and Elianov is thinking, maybe he's thinking just to play king g7 and some in the waiting style, but okay, let's see what he will play. We're back to first board, Levon Aronian against Panamaryov. Levon have played queen b3, as we mentioned that it's possible rook c1, queen b3, then bishop f3. So now bishop f3, maybe next move king g2, rook c4. try to somehow go forward. Maybe bishop e4 on rook d8, maybe bishop e4 because blacks can't play f5. Okay, the first queen e6, but also bishop f5 because of this pin. So queen b3 and Panamaryov is thinking, but I think he have to play g6, king g7, to play king g7, then rook d8 at some moment. Okay, but we will see what he will play. And the fourth board, Moiseyenko against Melkumian. Let's see how is going the things in that board. Rand plays bishop g7. As we said, bishop e2 have played. Now whites want to put the bishop on f3 and maybe later on e4. Melkumian played queen d5. He wants to exchange the queens. Of course, if he managed to change the queens, so he would solve his problem. But of course, Moiseyenko didn't exchange the queens. He played queen c2. Now bishop f3 is coming, and he wants to take the pawn on c6, which is really weak pawn. Rand again back to queen d6. It's a pity that we couldn't see the times, how many minutes they still have left. And queen d6. Now Moiseyenko is thinking. I don't know why, but I have some feelings that Rand is in some time trouble because he just played back with the queen, and now bishop f3 is an unpleasant move. Also queen b3 is possible just to attack the pawn on b6, and if rook a b8 then some bishop f3 to attack the pawn on c6. Later on maybe if rook dc8 then queen a4 is possible. Okay, this is the position, queen d6, and Moiseyenko is still thinking. We will see what move, what idea he could make to do. Let's see the first board. There have played some moves in this position. When white played queen b3, black's answer was rook a8. They attack immediately the pawn on a4. The only move was rook c4 to protect the pawn. It was check on a1. Bishop f1 was the only move. And now blacks are thinking. It's not easy for white to continue his attacking chances, but I think king g2, then whites want king g2, then bishop e2 to bring the bishop on f3. They somehow they must activate the position. In this position, still Movsisyan is thinking. Panamaryov is thinking. And in the game, Movsisyan Elyanov, it's no move after d4. Also in the game of Moiseyenko Melkumian is no move. Rook d8 have played Panamaryov. I think he don't want to let whites to play d4. Also his queen on a1 is very active and annoying white kings. Also he's not letting two white pieces to be very active. We can see if there are any result in other matches. In India, USA, there is one draw in board number 4. Daniel Naroditsky with white. He made a draw with Santosh Gujarati. And it's one more draw in a match, Egypt against Israel, Mohamed El Sherif against Smirin Ilya. But rest 3 games still playing. And in Russia against Cuba, there is still in the 4 boards, there is a still fight. So let's back to our games. Ponomarev have played rook d8, Aronian is thinking, Movsisyan, Elyanov, there are also Elyanov is still thinking, and in the Melkumian's games also after queen d6, Marcinko having his time and he's thinking how to continue, how to try to break the black's position. Still are players thinking, and we will take small break and we will back soon to see how their players continuing the games, and maybe we will see how are the result in other matches. Dear friends, we back from small break, so let's see how continues the games. Let's start from the first board when Ponomarev played rook d8, so he's trying to not let whites maybe play d4 and start to activate his pieces. Of course, Levon played king g2. As we said, he wanted to play bishop e2, bishop f3. Black's answer was queen e5. They bring back his queen and didn't let whites to play bishop e2. Also possible they want to play rook d4 to change the rooks. After this exchange, they will not have any real problem to make a draw after changing the rooks. But of course, white didn't agree with black with this exchanging. Maybe it's better for white to change the queens, but I think it's anyways, white need to play with all the pieces, and Aronian played queen b4, the move I like very much. So at the first they didn't let blacks to play rook d4, and maybe it's possible to play d4, then bring the bishop to f3 and try to play d5 to exchange this pawn d3 on e6. Then if white could change these pawns, maybe they will have start attack on a pawn on f7, then they will have two weaknesses. I mean, blacks will have two weaknesses. One is that whites are pawn up the pawns on c6, and it will be second weakness, the pawn on f7, and it will give the whites good chances for winning. Ponomarev played queen f6. He's just, I think he's just waiting. Maybe he wants to play on bishop e2, he wants to play rook d5, and if bishop f3 he will have rook f5 to attack on the line f. So queen f6, and Levon is thinking how to play, how to break the position in a queen side. Maybe it's possible to play d4, but after d4 he must be very careful to not lose the pawn on d4, because the bishop on f1 is not, he can't never protect the pawn on d4. But d4 will give him some extra options to play bishop d3, then bishop e4, and eventually he will put his bishop to f3, which he need. So Let's see the position after queen f6. Levon have 14 minutes and Ruslan have 16 minutes. Let's go to the game board number 3, where are playing Movsisyan against Elyanov. We see that 28 moved d4, and we said that blacks can play rook a8 to start annoying whites on the line A, and now blacks want to take on a1 and the pawn on d4 is hanging. But also we said that he could play king g7, just move, which is just a waiting move, and start to maybe push h5, g5 to start some attack on a king side. Sergey answered g3 because okay, how to play? He can't move, he can't play. I think this taking is good for white. I'm sorry, for black. Then they will have a basic pawn on a3, and if not taking on a4, they can't move rook b1 because rook a2 is coming. This is also very unpleasant for white. So he played g3. Blacks continue h5. Now I think they want h4, and if g4, it would be some king h6, king g5. The king can be played on f4. White's answer was h4. They stopped the black's pawn. King h6. I think here also it's rook e8 is possible, but also maybe possible some rook e4, and whites can take on a4, can't move the rook up, but maybe they can play f3 and just go back. Maybe this f3 could be better for blacks, because now pawn on g3 will hang at some moments, and also the square e3 will be weak. But okay, king h6. Elyanov is just continuing his line. He's just playing, maybe he wants to play g5 at some moment. So he played rook d3. He attacked the pawn on c3. Blacks continue rook e8. Now rook a4, ba. It's a good for blacks. So Sergey played rook c1. Now it's important that blacks didn't have this bishop g5 move, which was always annoying this the rook on c1. But now I think after b4 it will be just better position for black. The next move will be rook a2 with the idea rook b2. Then the next rook will come to a2. So it's a bit unpleasant endgame. Maybe g5 will be at some moment, and h take g5, bishop takes g5, pawn on d5 is hanging, knight on b3, can't move. So it's just, I think white have to bring his king on d3 very hurry. And just rook f3 maybe now to play rook f3, if b4, I mean king g7, then king e2 and king d3. After this, that king will come to d3. I think it's maybe it's okay for white. Because of this, I think blacks didn't want to play b4, because if b4, then you are closing the rook, fourth rank for the rook. But maybe it's possible to play rook c8, and if some move like king e2, just play rook c4 to attack the pawn on d4, and if rook f3, we have king g7. Now is bishop d4 is coming. King d3 is not possible because takes, and d5 pawn is hanging. So king e2, rook c2 will come. So maybe now rook c8 is a possible move, just to protect the pawn and start to continue. Okay, let's go to the game number 4, the board number 4, where Moisenko is playing Melkumian. Here we was watching the game when round back with the queen. Moisenko again back with the queen. He couldn't find move better than a queen back. Rand plays again queen d5. He wants to exchange the queens, and eventually whites change the queens. Rook takes the queen, bishop f3. Rand plays rook d6, and h takes g6, h takes g6, and bishop c6. Now whites are a pawn up, but blacks, I think, they solved the most dangerous problem. They changed the queens. Now it will be not some attacking motifs on f7. There will be not some sacrifice on f7, on g6. Okay, they are just pawn down, but still they have good chances to make a draw. At least they can play rook d8, attacking on a pawn d4. Whites can't move the knight because of bishop is hanging on, but okay, c6, now bishop b7 is possible, and if some rook d4, it's possible take and play maybe rook c7. Also bishop a6 is possible to just take the pawn, but here I think black have some compensation for the pawn, and they can hold the position with active rook, and okay, they have some chances. But rook c7 is a possible, but maybe here bishop e5 takes and knight d5, or maybe knight f5. Okay, they have some chances. So bishop c6, and Rand is thinking. Let's go back to the first board, where Levon Aronian is playing against Ruslan Panamariof. The last move was queen b4, queen f6, and Levon was thinking. He played d4, which we mentioned that he need for bishop d3 and bishop e4. Ruslan played g6, as he have to put his king on a black square because he have black bishop, black square bishop, so he need to put his pieces on a black squares. Bishop e2 continues Levon. He wants to bring the bishop on f3, and as we said, he need to push d5. After what, he can exchange the pawns on d4 to e6, and blacks will have a second weakness on f7. So here Panamariof is thinking. Levon have left 8 minutes against 15 minutes of Panamariof, but Levon didn't have a problem with the time because he have to make only 5 moves, so he can just make any move just to have his time after 14 moves. Let's go to the game number 3. We are playing Movsisyan against Elianov. As we say that Elianov could play rook c8, he played rook c8, Movsisyan played king e2. As we mentioned that he need the king on d3. He need the king on d3 because otherwise there is no piece who can protect the pawn on c2, who can protect the pawn on d4 immediately in a one square. The king on d3 will solve the problem of these 2 pawns, but as we said, we have to calculate this rook c, c4, rook f3, and king g7. But blacks continue rook c7, which is also a very interesting move. Now rook f3 is not possible because just taking on d4, he just protect the pawn on f7 and continuing his play. Maybe blacks now want king g7, and if move like rook d1, just to take under control the pawn of d4, then blacks can play rook a2, and now the pawn is hanging. But maybe rook f3, just take, and if king d3, blacks have this rook b2, very important move. So rook f3 is not possible. White have to back rook c1, and now maybe it's just possible to play king g7 or g5 to try to break this king side. f4, just bishop f6, rook f3. Okay, then king g6, try to play king f5, king g4 to activate a king. Rook c7, Elyanov had 6 minutes against 12 minutes of Movsisyan. Melkumian is still thinking. And in a first board, Aronian against Panamaryov. Let's see what happened. Ruslan played h5, he wanted to play h4 and have some counterplay in a king side. Levon's answer was h4, he is not letting blacks to play h4 and get some counterplay, but blacks continues king g7 and bishop f3. Eventually the white bishop is now on f3 and white somehow will start to preparing d5. I think they will play some queen d2, maybe queen d3, and at some moment they will push the pawn to d5. So this is a position now, and Panamaryov is thinking. Now there are some zeitnotes. Everyone have some time problems. And we are trying to be fast to see everywhere how is going the game. Let's see the Movsisyan's games. King e2, rook c7, and here Sergei played rook d1. He wants to play a king d3. As we mentioned, it's very important to put the king on d3. But here Elyanov played g5. He is starting to break the white's position in a king side. Maybe h takes on g5, and if now bishop g5 is also possible rook b1, because now rook a2 he have king d3, which is also possible, and maybe it's not so bad. Okay, he took on a g5. Now Elyanov is thinking, but also maybe king g5 is possible, but okay, but I didn't see what next he will do after king g5, so I would prefer bishop g5. Okay, but Pavel took with the king. He want to let a pressure on a d4 pawn, because now king d3 he would have rook c4 against attack on a pawn d4. Okay, maybe because of this he take with the king. Now he wants to play rook c4, which is also very interesting. But maybe now rook h1 is possible, and if rook c4, but okay, rook h1 he would just take on d4. Yes, he would just take on d4. So king g5, interesting move. He is just taking with the king and he wants just to play rook c4. After what, it's not easy to understand how whites want to defend this pawn on d4. Of course he can back with the rook on d3, but then rook c4 is coming, rook cd1, maybe possible rook cd1, and just stay in a passive and wait what can do blacks. I mean, how do they want to break the position? King e5, f5 is possible. Okay, king f3 at least right there, but they can give the check, and king g6 just took f4 to continue to solve the problem of the pawn d4 with this side of rooks. This was the king g5. Sergey played king d3. But what is the idea on rook c4? Let's see, let's understand. I think he wants to play just rook a1, and if bishop d4, he just take on a4, and the bishop is hanging. Sorry, bishop on d4 is hanging by knight. So he wants to play rook a1 and just maybe just stay passive and just wait. But also bishop d4 maybe is not a treat, because knight d4, rook d4, king c3, but there is unpleasant rook endgame. I think rook ac4, king b3, and king g4. King will come here. Black's plays rook c4, and now the pawn is okay. Maybe it's not hanging, but it's still white have to solve the problem of the pawn on d4. So coming king g4, king f3, but maybe king e3 will solve the problem of this side. But then king g4 is coming, and with the check on g5, and if f3 check, king g3 is maybe impossible. It's really very dangerous. So f3, he can just back king f5. Now the problem of bishop g5 is again, now he have again to solve the problem of this check. So rook c4, and Movsisyan is thinking how to defend this position. Let's back to see the game of Levon Aronian in the first board. Bishop f3, and Ponomarev played just king g8. He's just waiting. As we said, Levon played queen d2. He wants to play d5 because it's just not. I wouldn't see the other idea in this position how to continue the game, because rook can't move, queen can't move. I mean, he can't make some active idea with these pieces. So only idea is just queen d2. And again, Ponomarev have played king g7. He's just waiting to d5, and maybe he can. He's just waiting to d5. But I think d5 must be played, because okay. Otherwise, I didn't see how whites want to continue the game. Okay, rook b4, but it's not give whites anything. Maybe queen e3, but then at least we can see, okay, just king g8, then what else, queen e4, just king g7, then it's not an easy to improve the position. Maybe queen g5, try to exchange the queens, but I think, okay, just even king g7, and okay, exchange of queens, but there is still nothing real to do. So in this position, Levon is now thinking, I think he will play d5. He will try to. Okay, he played queen b2. He's just. I think he's just waiting to move 14. So now I think he will make one more move and he will take his time. His 30 minutes and he will start to think how to continue this game, how to play, because you don't need to make this important decision in a time trouble and to play d5. So I think now Panamario will continue in the same way. So I think he will play just king g8, and Levon maybe will play some queen c3, just to play a move 14 and have his time to start to think. Then okay, let's back to the game of Sergei Movsisyan. Let's see how is going the play over their board. As we say that king e3 is dangerous because of king g4. Rook a1 was played in this position. Now he can't take on d4 because rook a4. I can't play bishop d4 because rook a4. And now blacks are thinking how to play, because it's possible on king. If some move like king g4, maybe it's possible to exchange the rooks now, because b8 is impossible because of rook is hanging on c4 and rook a4. King c3, king f3. But okay, rook d2, and okay, it's also maybe check. Check was possible, but it's not working because of king e2, very important move. But okay, rook d2 is quite enough. And rook a1, now blacks are thinking how to play. I think maybe he can back just rook c8. But maybe now white can take on a4 and play knight a5, because the king on d3 is really very good, very strong. He's staying here, and after knight c6 he will have this pawn. So rook a1 was a really, I will put a strong move. Now blacks have to solve the problem of these rooks. Whites want to take on a4 and rook a4 take on the pawn on c3. Some problem in the game. Moiseyenko Melkumian, we can't see the moves didn't coming after after move 27, when whites take on c6. Maybe after some minutes we will try to see how is going the position. Let's back to the game of Movsisyan and Elyanov. Here I think Elyanov find the only move rook a b4. Now he is treating to take on d4, and Sergei is thinking. It's possible to play king e3, but as I mentioned, king e3 have some problem of king g4. King g4 with the idea of bishop's check. But also, you know, it's interesting to play some rook c8 with the idea to take on, I think, just to take somewhere on b3. Sorry. Rook c8. I mean, to play rook c8 with the idea of taking on b3, sacrificing the pawn takes, and c2 with this king g4 and bishop g5. Of course not now, but at some moment it can be interesting. So rook a b4 was played, and Sergei is thinking now. He can play maybe rook a7 in this position. because bishop d4 he could take on f7. It should be okay for him, bishop f6, but I didn't see any real problem here for white. Rook a7, maybe it's possible, just king g6, but then rook d7 is coming. If bishop d4, okay, just take on d6, and I think it's not any real problem. So after rook a b4, Sergei is thinking, but I think rook a7 can be played, and bishop d4, rook f7, bishop f6, but then rook d7. Okay, it's quite okay for white. They can. Okay, rook a7 was played. Now blacks have to think how to play. Okay, there are some moves in the games. Moiseyenko against Melkomyan, but at the first, let's see what happened in the first board. Levon played his 14th move. As we say, Ruslan played king g8, just waiting, and Levon also played rook b4. And maybe he is treating to take on b6 to sacrifice the exchange, which is unpleasant for black, because I mean, if now Ruslan will wait just king g7, here I think black will have real problems with this pawn, and also the pawn on a4 pawn is really very dangerous. So now rook b4 and his 14th move, Ruslan have to be very careful, because after, if he will go in the wrong way, so white will take on b6 and will win the game. Now let's see what is going in the game of Hrant Melkumyan against Alexander Moiseyenko. Moiseyenko is playing white, and after bishop c6, Hrant take on c6. We was thinking also about rook d7, about these endgames, and we thought that white are a pawn up, but still blacks have good chances for draw. Knight c6, white takes on c6, and Hrant play king f8. He's bringing his king to the center to hold the position. King f1. Also here blacks can't play rook c8 because of knight e7. Knight e7 check. So the king f8 is an important move to take under control the square e7. Rook c8, I mean king f1, rook c8. Now he have to back with the knight to e5. Knight b4 was the move also, but then take and bishop d4. I think it's just equal position. Black didn't have any problem. They just take a back a pawn. So knight e5 have played. Knight e5, rook takes on c1, rook takes on c1, and Hrant take on e5 with the bishop. If now d takes e5, then rook d2, and I think it's just draw, because b3, then I can play rook d3, rook b1, and just a5. It's a4 and just king e7, just activate. Okay, whites are maybe rook c3 at the first. Okay, whites are a pawn up, but I think they will not win this game, because king d2, it's also possible some move like b5, a takes b5, rook c5, some exchange of the pawns. Okay, let's back to see how to continues the game. Rook, bishop e5, Moiseyenko take on e5 with the f pawn, rook takes d4, he played rook c6, b5 blacks must play rook a6, he played rook d2, attacking to the pawn on b2, b4 and g5, very good move. He's just didn't let whites to play f4. I mean, okay, he can play f4, but now he will exchange on f4, then rook d4 always will attack the pawn. So g5, whites play rook a5 and rook d5. Now we're going to attack the pawn on e5, and whites now are thinking, but I think f4, maybe they have to play f4, because otherwise I will play g4. If it will be black's moves, I will play rook d5. If it is just a black move, I will play g4, and I will stop these two pawns with one. So it will be enough for draw after g4. But f4, maybe I didn't want to play f4 because I think I can just play king g7, king e2. Okay, maybe I can exchange this and king g6, king e3, king f5. But maybe we have to be careful in these moments to be able to move like a4, b takes a4, and this pawn endgame king d3, because now king is catching this pawn, and king f5, b5, and it's very hard to understand how is going the game. Also maybe here it's not possible. Let's see this moment, a4, but okay, I will just take. Okay, and take, it's just black are winning. Rook a4 is not working, just take on e5. Blacks are okay. So rook d5, and Moisenko is thinking how to play. Let's back to the board number 1, to the game of Levon Aronian. He played rook b4, and Ponomarev answered queen e7. Okay, he's preparing to this rook b6 sacrifice, but I think rook b6 can be played even now. I think it should be winning for white. I don't know, but I think this blacks just can't stop all these pawns a and c. Okay, now Levon have 31 minutes, and he have enough time to calculate these lines after exchange sacrificing. So let's go to the game of Movsisyan. Let's see what happened in that game. Okay, we was stopping, then rook a7 was played, 38 move. As we mentioned, that black have to take on d4, white have to take on f7. We was thinking also bishop f6, but king g6 was played, but okay, if rook d7, maybe bishop f2 and possible. So Sergey just back rook f3, and Elyanov played bishop e5. Now Sergey is thinking. He have up the time 30 minutes, so he will take I think some while he will think. But I think general problems is solved. Then I think it's about equal, and he will manage to make a draw. Okay, blacks still have, I think, some play like h4, then to take on h4. But okay, I think in general the position is equal. Then let's see the last game, where are still not time control is not. There is still not 14 moved. Then okay, Melkumyan is playing against Elyanov, against Moisenko. Rook d5, this was the position, and here we fought f4, but it probably can't be ending in a draw. But Moisenko find the an interesting continuation to play g4. Now rook e5 is impossible because of a4 and hanging a rook on e5, so he can't take on e5 and Hrant played king e7, but whites continue just king g2. I think the plan, white's plan is easy, just to play king f3 and play king e4, then activate the rook from a7 to b7. So king g2, Hrant played king d7. Moisenko played rook a7 check, Hrant played king e8. But okay, I think he wants just to repeat the position and to go. Okay, he played rook a5 and king d7. So here also white maybe can play king f3, and if rook takes on e5, then rook e5, and if a4, now Hrant have this move king c6. So I think there is not a big problem, so he is solving the problem in the end game. He's a pawn down, but soon I think he will get the pawn back. So in all positions we have played 14 moves, so players now will take a while time to think, and we will go to some break. We will back soon and we will continue this match. The chess friends, will come back from small break and let's see the games. Let's start from Moisenko Melkumyan. Moisenko is still thinking, but I think he couldn't find just anything in this position. It's just drawish. He can play rook a7, rook a5, repeat the position, or he can just, okay, he can give the e5 pawn and play this position, but it's rook ending and equal pawns. It's just drawish position. So in this position, it's nothing can be happened. So I think soon they will agree a draw. Let's go to the game of Sisian against Elianov. This was the position, and Sergei played rook a1. So if we can see that in the first board, Aronian has a winning position, and only here Ukrainian team can play for a. Okay, he can play. He still have some chances to playing for a win. So Elianov may have to play very active. Otherwise, I think he can play some h4, and soon he can agree a draw. But he played rook b3. He should sacrifice the exchange and play rook d4 check. Movsisyan is thinking on the check on rook d4, and now position became very sharp. Maybe he have to play king e3, I think, because king c3 it's not possible because some move with the rook and white are losing the rook. So here king c2 or king e2, I think they are not so good because black will give this check on d2, and I think he have to play king e3, which is a which move must be played. But here black have, I think, and they can take on d5. It will be full compensation for the exchange, or maybe it's possible just to play rook d2 with the idea rook b2 and try to attack on a pawn b3. Also possible is rook b4, but I think here rook a3 is not working because of c2, and the only move can stop the c pawn is a king d2, but then black have this bishop b2. So also bishop rook b4 is possible. I think now Sergey will take the time and he will think in this position, because it's now really very important. He have to save this position, and I think if he will save the position, Armenia will will win this match. So let's go to the first board, where is Levon Aronian is playing against Ruslan Panomarev, and let's see how is going the game. This was the position when for the players at 30 minutes after 14 move, and as we mentioned that of course Levon took on b6, he sacrificed the exchange. Ruslan have to take on b6, Levon took with the queen. Here I think Ruslan played rook a8, maybe rook c8 he might play, and a5, rook c7, because if a6, now with the idea of queen b7, I mean if some waiting move king g7, queen b7 is winning the game. After cb, queen can't stop these pawns. a6, so but he have rook a7 move, and if queen b7, then now he have saving move queen c7, but still here white should find some interesting options. Also here is very interesting c7, because queen c7 is just losing on spot after bishop b7 and pawn goes to the queen. But here it's interesting to see how we'll continue the game after rook c7, because bishop b7, it looks like white must be winning here. I mean, because a7, a8, but king g7, because now is coming, okay, I will show you. a7, rook b7, and a8 is not a check. And if white want to move the queen from the line b to have a7, rook b7, a8, then rook b7 is just coming. I think Panomarev have to play rook c8, but then maybe deciding like in the game bishop e, okay, or here bishop e2 could be winning, but queen d6, he can have bishop b5, queen d5 check, and king g1. Maybe also here blacks can play queen d6. The idea is to not let to bishop on a6 to b7 to come and capture the rook, and if a6, then just go back by queen, and I think it's not easy. Still white have big advantage, but now they have to find one new idea to winning the game. So let's back to the move queen b6. Okay, rook a8, maybe this was the mistake of the maybe it was the decisive mistake, because after this Levon played a5, black have to play, okay, c7 is not working because of rook c8 and white are losing the pawn. a5, Ruslan played rook a7. I think he was thinking just on he was thinking about a6, then queen c7 he had, and he thought that he can hold this position, but I think he just overlooked this very strong move, bishop e2. And the problem is if queen c7, white's still playing bishop a6, and the pawns are going to the queen. And he played rook c7, but then white continues bishop a6. He's trying to get some counterplay e5, but then okay, bishop b7. Now Levon wants a6, a7, easily go, and if ed, I think, okay, even a6, but maybe queen e4 check and king h2, queen f3. Queen f3, he can have queen d4, king h2, and maybe it's just winning. But also he can, I think he can take on d4 rook b7, take on b7, queen take on b7, check, then king h2. After some move, any move, just white is just playing queen b6, then the pawn goes to a8. I think it's impossible to stop this pawn. So rook a7, e11 played bishop b7, Ruslan answered e4. He was hoping to a6 and play e3. Here he can get some counterplay. I think a7, he could play e2, but even here I think it's just losing after queen a1. But okay, 11 plays, I think, without any risk. He just played d5. Now e3 just is taking on e3 by the queen. Okay, I think it's just winning position. The pawn a is unstoppable. He's going to the queen. So let's back to see how is going the game in Moiseyenko Melkumian. There are still no move, but okay, I think maybe they agreed draw, just it's no move. And an important game on the match. So let's see. Movsisyan against Elianov. This was the position. I think Sergei played king c2, rook d2 check was played, and king c1. You want a king against the pawn to be more safe, but then rook b2 have played Elianov, and Sergei is still playing because still thinking, because rook a3, now Elianov have b4, and he want to take the pawn, and these two pawns can be dangerous. This is the position, but also rook b1 is interesting, but then rook a2 is very unpleasant move. Now c2 is coming, b4 is the only move, because c2 now he have rook b3, but this is quite dangerous for white. I mean, some king g5, king g4 can be here, or maybe h4 to open the f4 square for the bishop. So okay, let's just wait what will play Sergei and go back to the first board. Levon Aronyan against Ruslan Panamariev. So d5, Panamariev answered queen e5. Levon played a6, he's just going to the queen, queen d5. Now if a7 or queen c7, Ruslan want to play e3 and get some counterplay, but here was the correct and very strong move, king h2, I think, which is bringing the win to the white. Still no moves in the game of Moiseyenko Melkumian. I think there will be a draw. And the last game, which is very important in this match, Movsisyan against Elianov. Movsisyan is still thinking after 44th move of black rook b2. But okay, let's see how are the result in other matches, and we will back to this match. In Hungary against China, there are 3 draws, and the last board I think there is no moves, but there was perpetual check. So the match will finish, I think, 2-2, and 4 draws. It's not they will be agree in this match against Hungary against China. India against USA, there are 4 draws and again 2-2. Egypt against Israel, there was 2 draws and 2 games are left. So Rochstein is maybe winning, but Sutovsky is losing the game, so here also can be 2-2. The last match, Russia against Cuba. In the match, Grishuk, Dominguez, they are repeating the moves. Karyakin made a draw against Bruzon. Tomaszewski have some small advantage against Guezade, and in Gonzalez, Vidal against Nikita Vitigov, Gonzalez have 3 extra pawns on rook endgame, but still he's losing 1 pawn and he will have 2 pawns up, but Vitigov will have drawing chances. So let's back to our match, Armenia against Ukraine, and we will see our continuing the game. Okay, Panamaryov have resigned after King H2, so we are congratulating Levon Aronian with his first victory in this tournament, and now Armenia is leading in this match 1.5 against half. So we have left another 2 games, and let's see how are the games in a Alexander Moisenko against Hrant Melkumian. After King D7, in a 41 move, Moisenko have played King F3 as we fought Rook E5, and he played A4. Melkumian played King C6, was continuing A takes B5, Rook takes B5, Rook A7, Rook takes B4, Rook takes F7, King D6, Rook G7, Rook B3 check, King G2, Rook B5, Rook B5, and here King G3, it was Rook B3 check, F3, Rook B5. Okay, it's just draw. I think they will agree in a few minutes, because it's just, I didn't see how white can play. Just even if black will not have this pawn on E6, I think it's even this position can be draw, because king just coming to F6 and it's just draw. So I think the last game, Elyanov, Movsisyan against Elyanov, is the last chance for Ukrainian team to bring the draw for their team. Rook A6 was played by Movsisyan. I think the idea is on Rook B3 just play Rook E3, treating this bishop, and if move like King F7, I think Sergei want to play Rook E5, D takes E5, and King C2, Rook B2, King C3, Rook F2, and King D3. This endgame will ending in a draw. Okay, white are pawn down, but I think it's just draw because too active king and the rook. Okay, rook A6, black take the rook on, take the pawn on B3. Okay, Moisenko and Melkumian agree the draw in the position what we saw. So the last game in this match, and we need only draw. Armenia need only draw to winning this match, his first win. So Rook A6, Rook B3. Now Sergei Movsisyan is thinking. He have 21 minutes against 30 minutes of Pavel Elyanov, and he is still thinking. So we will take a small break and we'll back soon. Dear friends, we're back from small break, and now we will see how was the continuing the game of Sergei Movsisyan. After Rook B3, Sergey have played rook e3. He just want to take on e5, and we mentioned that if king f7, of course he can take on e5 and play king c2, which is enough for draw. Of course, Elianov understands all this and play king f5. Now rook e5, he takes king e5, and it's not the same. So Sergey played rook e2. Also was interesting to play rook a8 just to activate the rook and maybe play for a win. But okay, rook e2, and just he's staying. He's just not letting blacks to play rook b2. Let's see the result in other matches. Hungary and China, they finished their match 2-2 for draws. The same was India USA 2-2 for draws. The match against Egypt and Israel ending 2 draws, and one game Sutovsky is just 3 pawn down and he's just have a losing position against Sami Shoker, and Maxim Rothstein is pawn up with Ahmed Adli, but Adli have very good chances for draw. So maybe this will be a first sensation in this tournament, and Egypt could manage to win against Israel. Let's see the last match, where we are playing Russia against Cuba. Vidyugov could manage to make a draw without 2 pawns in a rook ending. Tomaszewski still playing, have some small advantage. Bruzon made a draw against Karyakin, and Grishuk, I think is maybe it's also can be ending in a draw, but it's still very dangerous position for the Grishuk. Okay, let's back to our match. We have I think the only game has left. In this position, Elianov played king g4. He's trying to play king f3, and the main idea of Elianov in this position, I think, is to bring the bishop on the diagonal c1 to h6, but he couldn't find the way how to bring the bishop, because it's not easy. Now Sergey is thinking. After king g4, he have left about 20 minutes, and Elianov have only 7 minutes. I think it's also very important to have more time, and so he can take his time to make the right decisions in this very important moment for Armenian team. We can see what he can play. Maybe he can play king c2, rook b2 check, some king d3, activate his king. But then maybe black will play some rook b1. Okay, but now it's possible to take on e5 and take on c3. But still, this endgame. Okay, king f3, I have rook f6 check. I think it's quite enough. This moves quite enough to make a draw. So king c2, rook b4, I think I could take on e5, take on c3, rook c4, check, and okay, if king b3, then rook d4, still some chances for black, and if king d3, rook d4, king e3, rook d5, king e4, rook c5, but okay, it's I think it's just draw. So Sergey is thinking. in this position after king g4. So we will see. Okay, there is still no moves, but I think I would choose in this moment king c2. I think it's the I think it's best move, and if draw is enough for white, just take this bishop, and it's just really enough. I think it's just really enough to make a draw. So king g4, and Sergey is still thinking. Rest games are also there are also not a new result. So we will just wait what continuation will, what decision will make Sergey. Maybe he can play in other way. I mean, not king c2, but also it's not easy to understand how else to play. Maybe f4, but it's quite dangerous. I didn't want to move this pawn because always will hanging the pawn on g3, then pawn h4, h5. I mean, will be quite dangerous after all. So if king f3, I think it's rook e5 can be played, de and d6, and now probably white can win the game. I think if ef or some move e4, just d7 is winning the game. So rook b2 must be played, and f takes e5, and just two pawns will finish the game. So f4 is a move which is interesting, but it's possible to play just bishop d4 to not hurry up with king f3, and rook d6, just take the pawn. It's possible some king f3 can rook d e6, but possible is king g3 to take the pawn and start also pushing the pawn on h5. It's really became a very messy position. Okay, maybe Sergey can choose this. Okay, check king f3. Maybe he can choose this continuation when he need a win, and or team need a win. But in this moment, I think he will play more safe. So I think he can choose the line with king c2, just to equalize the position. Try to equalize the position. Give back this exchange. So let's see what he will play, what continuation he will choose. I think he have some 15 minutes against 7 minutes of Elyanov, so he have enough time to find right moves, right plan to make a draw. There is still no new results in other matches. it's very interesting that today was only one win, and it was made Levon Aronian. There is no wins in match India against USA, no wins against Hungary against China. So there was 8 games and 8 draws, and 2 draws in a match Egypt against Israel, 2 draws against a match against Russia against Cuba. So it's only one win today, and it make Levon Aronian in a nice style. Movsisyan is still thinking, and it's very interesting what move he will choose. It's maybe rook e5. He can play immediately d takes e5. He can play d6, but then rook b2. Then rook is coming to d2. Okay, it's not working. So I think king c2 is the key move. King c2, just activate the king to put his king to d3 and try to sacrifice back the exchange on e5. So we will take a small break and we will be back soon. Dear friends, we're back from small break. So let's see how is continuing the game of Sergei Movsisyan. King g4 was the last move, and here Sergei chose the line with f4. But I think it was better to, like in this situation, it was better to play king c2 and try to play for a draw with rook e5 and so on. So f4 was the move which played Sergei. Bishop d4, as we say, was the only answer. Rook e8. I think rook d6 was better, and here white might have better chances after king f3 and rook d6. Also was possible king g3 and what we mentioned, but Sergei chose the line with rook e8, and here bishop c5. Elyanov defend his pawn on d6, and he is trying to take on g3 and get a counterplay. King c2, of course, continues white. Rook b4. It's no other square for the black rook. Rook a8. Sergei wants to bring the rook to the king side because there is no other piece on the king side, and it's very dangerous pawn on h5. So Elyanov took on g3, and f5 is the last pawn on the king side. He have to save this pawn. Rook f4. Now blacks want to take on f5. Rook g8 check, and now Elyanov is thinking. Both have about 7 minutes, but position is very sharp, and I think maybe black have some small advantage, and it's not easy for white to make a draw and on a spot. So king f3 might be have continued the game, and rook g5, but then h4 is coming. So king f3, if rook g5, then h4, and if king c3, may have placed bishop f2 or h3. So rook g8, king f3, I think, okay, have played by Elyanov. If king c3, then I think just rook f5, and the pawn on d5 is hanging. It's quite dangerous for white now. They are They have blacks have bishop and 2 pawns against rook, and third pawn is hanging. So king f3, and Movsisyan is still thinking. It was some small tactical problem. So we back. Sergei had 2 options. He could take on c3 or rook g5. He chose rook g5. Now it's black's move. They can play, I think they have 2 continuation in this position. First, they can play b4 to protect the pawn on c3. Then I think Sergei will take on h5. Then black can continue king g4, some move, okay, maybe rook h8 and rook f5. Still, it's better for black, and white must be very careful, because one more mistake could be very dangerous for them. So I think somewhere over here, I think rook e8 was a mistake. It was better, in my opinion, to take on d6, just to change some pawns. But maybe I think the problem was Sergei overlooked this bishop c5 move, because he just thought that it's impossible after king c2. He would just take a pawn on c3, but here rook b4, and the problem is that he's losing his 2 pawns on g3 and f4. I mean, now if he would play king c3, then king b4, f5, and rook f4. So it's also not so good. Okay, then continues king g3, f5. He has to play knight f4, rook g8, king f3, and maybe king c3, rook f5 to play some move like rook h2. But then rook d5 is coming. Rook d5. Then he has these checks, interesting checks, and may have this finish a draw, because bishop f2, he have rook f8. But here I think on rook h2 I didn't like the move bishop f2, which is really very strong. And okay, if some move like king b4, you can take rook d5, because rook f8 check, so h4 is coming, and king b5, rook d5, or maybe some bishop g3, black have some chances for winning. So let's back to the game. On rook g5, as we mentioned, black have 2 continuation. One was h4, king c3, but Elyanov chose b4. He just protect the pawn on c3. Now Sergei is thinking, but I think he have to take the pawn on h5. But then king g4, also king e4. Now I can see that it's also possible, but maybe king g4 is better option, and whites are losing the pawn on f5. Then maybe after this pawn they could lost also pawn on d5. So both of players are really very tired. Now soon it's also 5th hour that they are playing. Also can be mistakes by both sides, because really very hard game and a very hard situation in teams. I mean, the game is really very important, and it's a work on the results. So now both are very nervous. So before that Sergei will play the move, we will check the match against Egypt, Israel, and Russia against Cuba, how they finished, how they continues the games. So the Egypt against Israel. Sutovsky is just losing his free pawn down, and Rothstein still is pawn up and still want to play for a win. Maybe he played some interesting idea and still he have good chances for a win. So its possible result is 2-2. And let's see the Russia against Cuba. As we know, there was 2 draws and 2 games are left. Yevgeny Tomashevsky had good position. He have better end game against Kuezade, so he have good chances he can win this game. But Grishuk have big problems. He's pawn down, and but okay, he have some chances. He have queen bishop a pawn against queen knight and 2 pawns. So this is the games are left, and we just back to our game to see how continues the game. So as we mentioned, on b4, Sergei took on h5, and Pavel played king e4. So he want to take at the first, I think, pawn on d5. He thought the pawn is more important, or maybe he just want. I think now king b3 must be played, but now maybe he wants to play rook f1 and just, I mean, to not take a time taking these pawns, just immediately play on a queen side, try to move the pawns. Also, it's possible king d5, just take the pawn, and okay, f6 is not giving anything, just king e6, king e6, maybe some rook e6, some tricky move to attack the bishop on c5, which is quite interesting idea. But maybe on f6 is possible just king e4, or maybe just king d4. So he have to play rook h6 to protect the pawn, then rook f1 is coming, and check from b1 is really very unpleasant for white. So king e4, and it's the position, it's the current position in this game. Let's see how we'll play Sergei in this position. It's quite dangerous for him. He played f6. He's sacrificing the pawn, but what is the idea of the move? If I will take rook f6, what wants to play Sergei? Okay, he played king b3. He protect the pawn on d5. So if he played king b3 immediately, he was thinking that Eliana would take on d5. So he played f6. Rook takes f6, and he played king b3. Now he wants to activate his second rook. I mean rook on a2, and try to do something. Elianov played rook f1. He wants to give this check on b1. Sergei answered king c4. Maybe it was better, as we was thinking, just play king d4 to not let the white king to stay on c4 to protect the pawn on d5. So rook f1, king c4. Now Elianov is thinking. He played rook d1. Now he wants to give the check from d4 and take the pawn on d5. I think rook h4 check must be played. And if king e3, one more check on h3. And if king h4, okay, maybe one more check. So okay, let's see, king rook d1. Okay, rook h4 check has played. but here maybe it's just a draw. I think black should play king d4 to not let white to play king c4, but both they are short on a time. Elyanov have 3 minutes and Movsisyan have 2 minutes. Still it's a fight. And now Elyanov is thinking maybe some... Okay, maybe he can play... I mean, this is the position. Maybe he can play king f5, but still some checks. Or even maybe rook g2. Try to bring the second rook to the game. I think in a match Russia against Cuba, Tomaszewski have now big advantage in the end game, so I think he will manage to win the game. And Dominguez have also good chances to winning, so it could be 2-2, but still a fight. In the match against Israel, against Egypt, the game will finish soon. I think Sami Shoker is just winning, and Rochstein have some chances against Ahmed Adli. We back to our game, and there are no move after rook h4 check. Elyanov is still thinking. He have 1 minute left, but I think okay, he played king f3, but I think his mistake was that we mentioned was when he gave white's chance to play king c4. Okay, let's see what happened on king f3. Sergei played rook a h2. Now we want to give, I think, some perpetual check somehow. But there is not a bishop f2 here. Okay, some check. And if king e2, now c2 is coming. Okay, you can take it and take on f2. Okay, so it's just, I think it's just draw, or it's not, but it should be draw. Okay, Elyanov played bishop f2. Maybe there is a check also from other rook. King e2 and just take c2. Probably king d2. Okay, then better to give the with other rook. So Sergei have 2 minutes, and okay, he give the check with rook from the fourth. I think king e2 will be played. So just waiting what will play. Sami Shoker once against Emil Sutovsky. In the last game, Maxim Rochstein trying to win against Ahmed Adli with a pawn up position. He's trying to save the match. So now they get some rook ending, rook 2 pawns against rook 2 pawns, but still white have good chances for winning. And rook h3 check. Still Elyanov is okay. He played king e2. Okay, I think now Sergei will take on b4 because there is no other move. king b4, pawn goes to c2. Okay, the line which we fought, and we hope that, okay, Sergei took on b4. I think c2, black must play c2, rook f2, king f2, rook h2, king e3, rook c2, rook d5. Of course, if white king would be on d2, it's just a draw. But still, whites have some problems in this endgame. They have to solve the problem of king. Okay, took on f2, rook king f2, rook h2 check. I think king e3 must be played, rook c2, and rook d5. Now this is the position. There is no move king c3 because of check and pawn and d is losing. So maybe some move like rook g2 or rook h2, but then rook d1. Still it's some problems, king c3, then check, king b2, and maybe rook c5. But we'll start some checks from the line h. That should be draw. So this is the position, and rook d5, Sergei is thinking he has 3 minutes against 2 minutes of Elyanov. Sergei played rook h2. I think it's the right decision to give the checks from the rank, from the h line. Now Elyanov is thinking, he's trying to find some idea in this position. Rook d2 is not working because taking and king c4. Black will lose the pawn. So rook h2. And Elyanov is thinking, he played rook f5. An interesting move. He's trying to, maybe he wants to close on a check by the rook, which is possible because pawn ending is winning now. So rook f5, and what he wants to play on rook h6, he wants to play d5 maybe. King c3, but then d4 is coming, so rook h6, then he wants to play d5. And if check, he have this rook f3 gain and pawn ending is winning. So let's see what will play, what the move will choose the Sergei. But okay, he can play maybe king c3. The idea is if d5, he can give the check from h3, and rook f3, the endgame is a draw. So rook h3, you have to play king d4, then king d2 is just draw. So I think the best move in this position is just king c3. And Elyanov must back with the rook, then again king b4, and we get the same position. So rook f5, just king c3 have to be played. But also, I think there are other moves also which can give whites a draw, but clear one I think is king c3. Just bring the king, near to the pawn. So Sergei have 1 minute left. He's still thinking. He give the check on h3, which is also a good decision. If king e4, which is very important, you have king c3 and the rook f3 taken, king d4 is a draw. But as we mentioned, on the check must be played rook f3. Elyanov played rook f3 and Sergei played rook h5. And if now king e4, he wants to play king c4. And if rook f1 or f2, then just rook h4 check. And if now king d4, I think again he can give this check. King d5, again give this check. If king e5, he can give again check, and rook f5, he can just go rook h8. Okay, he played rook h5 check, king d4 is played rook h4 check, and he played king d3. Maybe king b5 now, because d5, king c5. Try to play king c6. And if rook f5 check, I will play king c6, d5. So maybe it's not good. And if he have to back, then again d5. So king d3, Sergei played rook h5. He's not letting blacks to push the pawn. I think was the best move. So if king d4, we have the same position, rook h4 check. The end game must be draw. So rook h5, Elyanov is still thinking. Okay, I didn't see the move out. We can play for a win. If rook f4 check, then just king b5. Rook d4, just king c6. Okay, but here maybe king c4. So maybe rook f4 check. Okay, maybe rook a5. Rook a5 very strong because d5 I have knights, rook c5 check, and I'm not letting pushing the pawn on d5. So you have to play the move. Then I with the rook to give you check and rook a5. So it's still draw. So rook h5 check. This is the position, and Elyanov is still thinking. He have last 50 seconds. Maxim Rochstein is winning to Ahmed Adli, so the Israel against Egypt will be 2-2. And let's see what happened in the Russia against Cuba. Tomaszewski has better rook ending, but still Quezada have some drawish chances. And also the same situation in the Grishuk Dominguez, where Dominguez have better chances. He is pawn up, so he will try to win. Okay, rook h4, king d3. Has played king d4, rook h4, and he played king e5. So the idea is if check, then rook f5, pawn ending is a drawish. But I think it's better to give this check to open the third rank for the king and place somewhere by the rook, some rook h8 or h7. It's not a big deal. Now I want king c3, and if you will play rook f3 again, I have this check. So this position is rook h5, rook f5, and now Movsisyan is thinking, but still he have. Okay, I think it's just draw. Play some move with the rook. I mean rook h8 or rook h7. It's not a big difference between these moves. But Sergei played rook h1. Okay, I think it's not a big difference. So the idea is the same. If rook f3, I think just rook h5 check. And if something like king d4, it could continue like rook d1 check. You have to back king e5 and just you can bring the king to c3, then it's just draw. So Elyanov back rook f3. I think rook h5 check must be played. Yes, Sergei played rook h5 check. And still there is no move, there is no chance for black because checks are coming. I think the important move was when Elyanov allowed two blacks, two whites to play king c4, and here I think after king c4 blacks are okay. The king d4 was a move which can give the good chances to winning. Rook h5, now he played king e4, but I think it's just king c4 now. And rook f1 just give this check on h4 and it's just draw. So king c4, I think it's just immediately draw. Because rook f1, rook h4, it's important that you don't have this, and king d5 pawn ending is just drawish. So king e4, Sergei is thinking, he have 1.5 minutes. Okay, he played king c4. Okay, now it's just draw. Because there is no continuation. I think soon they will agree a draw. Let's see the other games. Grishuk still pawn down and trying to make a draw against Dominguez. Both are very strong blitz players. Tomaszewski, I think, is now winning position against Quezade. Tomaszewski is pawn up. So there is still unclear match. It can finish by 3 results. I mean, it can be also a winning by Cuba, also winning by Russia, and also can be a draw. Rochstein won, and Israel could escape for a draw against Egypt. So we have, okay, Sergei Movsisyan also agreed a draw. They played d5, rook d5, rook c3, king c3, king d5, and it was agreed a draw.